Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder why sometimes, even when things seem good, we just can't feel happy or motivated to do anything? Perhaps you've noticed that your memory might play a role in how social you feel. Well, this new study might have some fascinating clues. They explored a deep connection between our memories, our ability to feel pleasure, and how social we are. And it turns out it's not just about having a bad day. This research looked at how well our verbal memory, the kind we use to remember words and conversations, might affect our social stuff. And if something called anhedonia sits in the middle of that. Anhedonia, folks, is basically when you lose interest or can't feel pleasure from things you used to enjoy. And it is a big deal in a lot of mental health challenges. They wanted to see if having a worse memory makes you more anhedonic. And if that in turn makes you less social. Pretty neat, right? So how did they figure this out? They grabbed a ton of people from a massive study called the UK Biobank. We're talking over 8,000 individuals. They picked people who had data on their verbal memory, how often they felt a lack of pleasure or interest, and how often they saw friends and family. They also made sure to only include people under 65 to avoid age messing with the memory results. Now, to make this really interesting, they didn't just look at people with diagnosed mental health issues. They compared a group with various past or current mental health diagnoses to a group without any. This means they were trying to see if this memory pleasure, social connection worked across the board, not just in people with specific conditions. They matched these groups carefully on things like age, sex, and how deprived their area was to make sure the comparison was fair. How did they measure all this stuff? Their verbal memory test involved matching words that were paired together. Think of it like remembering who goes with whom. For anhedonia, they used a simple but powerful question asking how often someone had little interest or pleasure in doing things over the last 2 weeks. And for social functioning, they asked about the frequency of visits with friends or family. Simple measures for potentially complex connections. And here's the big finding, the headline story. They found that yes, anhedonia was a major bridge between verbal memory and social functioning. Basically, having a weaker verbal memory meant people tended to feel more anhedonia, that lack of pleasure and motivation. And that anhedonia, in turn, led to having fewer social visits. It's like a domino effect. Bad memory leads to less joy, which leads to less fun with people. The direct link between memory and social visits on its own wasn't strong enough to be significant, meaning anhedonia was doing most of the heavy lifting in explaining that connection. But it gets even more nuanced. This connection wasn't the same for everyone. They found that this pathway where memory affects social life through anhedonia was actually stronger in men, in people who had a history of psychiatric diagnosis, and in those who reported more symptoms related to things like depression and anxiety, which they call internalizing symptoms. This tells us that while the connection is general, it can be more pronounced in certain groups. They also checked if maybe it worked the other way around, if anhedonia affected memory, which then affected social stuff. But that model didn't pan out. The primary story seems to be memory influencing anhedonia, which then influences social life. So what does this all mean? It means that problems with our memory might not just affect our ability to recall facts, but could chip away at our motivation and enjoyment of life, and subsequently our connections with others. This is a transdiagnostic finding, meaning it likely applies across different mental health conditions, and even in the general population. It highlights that looking at these underlying mechanisms can be more useful than just focusing on specific diagnoses. What is really exciting is the potential for interventions. If memory problems contribute to feeling blunted and socially isolated, then working on improving memory might actually help boost motivation and social skills too. Imagine a therapy that helps your memory, and as a side effect, you start feeling more joy and wanting to connect with people more. That is the implication here. They even suggest that training skills like episodic future thinking, which is basically being able to vividly imagine future positive events, could be a way to tackle this anticipation part of anhedonia. Now, as with all research, there are limitations. The study mentions that overall people's social functioning and memory were relatively good, and anhedonia levels were low in the general sample. This means the effects they found might be even bigger in groups with more severe issues. Also, they used a single question for anhedonia, which couldn't tell a difference between not looking forward to something versus not enjoying it when it happens. Future studies could use more detailed measures. And importantly, because this was a snapshot in time, they can't definitively say that memory causes the anhedonia and social issues, only that they are strongly linked. More research over time will be needed to confirm the direction of these effects. But even with these limitations, this study gives us a really compelling piece of the puzzle. It shows us that our cognitive abilities, specifically our memory, are intricately tied to our emotional well-being and our social lives. It is a reminder that looking at the brain, our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors can all be connected in really important ways. It suggests that by strengthening our cognitive skills, we might be able to unlock greater motivation and more fulfilling social connections for ourselves and for others. It's a powerful idea that highlights how interconnected our minds really are. So, what do you think about this connection between memory, pleasure, and social life? Does it resonate with your own experiences? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more explorations of the amazing human mind. And hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next dive into science. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.